Hi everyone, and welcome to Astrology Sphere. So I hope you're all well and that you made the most of the Taurus new moon. And I don't know whether you have seen, but I have posted a couple of Venus videos for the Venus retrograde and Venus in Gemini. So if you haven't checked those out and you're interested, then do go and have a look. So here we are again at another supermoon. Gosh, this is the fourth in a row. So if you think back, we've had all the full moons since February have been supermoons, which is really quite, it's saying something. So in keeping with that, it's fair to say that a Scorpio supermoon has the potential to be a little bit intense, for there to be a lot of drama around, and so it'll be up to all of us how we kind of work with that energy, whether we get caught up in the sort of ongoing drama of fear that's being played out on sort of media platforms, or whether we use this more constructively, because there is a lot of potential here for positive transformation, as well as a lot of magic. There's a Mercury-Neptune contact that's happening, which is really quite magical. So the next 2 weeks does have some potential to really make us see things in a new light, and for kind of little miracles to happen. So I urge you to sort of stay open to that as we move through the next 2 weeks. So Scorpio energy is quite an interesting one. The moon is exalted in the sign of Taurus, so that was the new moon. When she's in the sign of Scorpio, she's considered to be in her fall, and part of the reason is that this is the opposite sign to where her exaltation is. So if we think about this in a seasonal way, the moon is exalted in Taurus in the springtime, when there's a lot of flowers around and everything is kind of fresh, and there's this sort of green growth, and everything is kind of dewy and new. When we get to Scorpio, when the sun's in Scorpio, we get to the time of the year that's in America is called fall, and this is autumn, and this is when the leaves are kind of falling from the trees. It's just after harvest, so there's a lot of abundance around. It's the time of Thanksgiving, but at the same time, it also reminds us that winter is coming. The sun is sinking in the sky, the days are getting shorter and shorter, and so we're kind of moving into the second half of the life cycle, which is about kind of death and then rebirth at the winter solstice. So I think that what Scorpio is doing, this particular Scorpio moon, is it's reminding us of that the life cycle has two parts to it, and that we can't just kind of get fixated on sort of youth and potential, that we also need to realize that our time on earth is limited, and so we need to make the most of it, and there's nothing that reminds us more of that than kind of the intimations of mortality. And of course that's really what the coronavirus is sort of crystallizing in our minds, is that earthly life is short, so we need to make the most of it. And here I think there are some real opportunities for kind of revisioning, for letting go of fear, for example, for moving into a more alignment with our sort of spiritual gifts, with inspiration from above, and for moving into a kind of more of a flow, kind of grace and flow, if we allow ourselves to. Now it's interesting, the sign of Scorpio, although it's considered to be quite sort of spooky and kind of fierce, when it's weakened or not working well, it can be a little bit fearful and paranoid. There's Scorpios are quite hyper vigilant, and that is usually born from fear. It's this fear of external threat, and I do think that there is this energy around right now, that where people can get quite paranoid when they're sort of out and about, having to wear kind of masks in case they get sick. And I think we need to really kind of check our fears and try not to allow them to be our primary motivation. Self-preservation is good, but not to the point where we don't allow ourselves to do anything, where we won't allow ourselves any kind of joy, or to sort of get on with life, basically. And Scorpio being ruled by Pluto is the kind of the reinvention queen. This is transformation and kind of death and rebirth energy. So this is judgment. It's not just the death card in the tarot deck. This is also death and judgment. So this is about death and rebirth, and we need to just be mindful of that. I think there probably will be some events happening in our lives that will remind us that we need to just kind of stop and check ourselves when we start getting terrified about dying, and realize that death is simply a return to our spiritual home. We are souls, we are spiritual beings that are in bodies, and we're having an earthly experience. We're not actually of this earth. So even though our bodies may die, we do not. And there's no sign quite like Scorpio to remind us of this idea of the transmigration of the soul, that the soul is eternal, that this cycle of death and rebirth continues even after this particular earthly incarnation that we're currently experiencing. Now it's interesting that we've got Pluto making a trine to the Sun and Mercury in Taurus during this full moon. So I think this is reminding us of this transformational energy. And I thought a good way to sort of talk about this is again with the Splendor Solis Tarot, because the card that she, or the sort of image that she uses with the tarot card is the white bird. So this is the white dove of the albedo in alchemy, and this is about sort of rebirth. So it's interesting that not only do we have this idea of we've got mortal deaths in that the card is ruled by Mars, and of course Mars used to co-rule both Scorpio and Aries before Pluto was discovered. So this is kind of life and death. This is Mars is the god of war, and which is all about death and kind of domination and power, earthly power, the earthly power of the emperor. I mean, how does he maintain his power? But through force. And here we've got the the kind of the higher iteration of that. So the text goes, "I am the white bird, inner alchemy of death, child of the great transformers, lord of the gates of death." So interesting that again we have this idea of the portal, and if we have a look here, there isn't actually an image of a portal like there was in the great tree, the image for the new moon in Taurus. But nonetheless, this is the second portal. This is the spiritual portal that we pass through when we leave our bodies at death. So I come that you may reimagine stereotypes, releasing my triumphant ever-living powers. I am artisan of the imaginative intelligence, bringing you vision to create your inner images and stories in like manner to the harmonious elegancies. All Sun-Venus experiences in the four worlds are woven into my alchemical path. I am the white soul bird of threefold sublimation, a noble Scorpio eagle rising triumphant over the worldly abuse of Mars energies. So really it reiterating this idea of Scorpio as having sort of threefold symbols. We start with the snake or the scorpion, which crawls along the earth, which is the kind of Martian energy, the sort of very the material kind of scarcity mentality, and then you've got at the other extreme you've got the phoenix or the eagle. So this is really talking about the potential to kind of rise above, to ascend to higher levels of consciousness, to see things in a new light, to transform your situation, to take base metal and turn it into gold. And it's so I do see that as being kind of the potential sort of encapsulated in this particular full moon. As I said, Sun and Mercury will be making this trine to Pluto, which is all about metamorphosis, transmutation, transformation, rebirth. So I think it's about kind of reinventing ourselves, about letting go of whatever's been holding us back in the past, so that we can really embrace that abundance that we were so focused on at the Taurus new moon, and really get out of our own way so that it can kind of manifest, so that the fruits of that can kind of come from those seeds that we planted at the new moon. So what is the upshot then of this particular full moon? Well, really what I see it is almost like a kind of a purging, a catharsis before we can really kind of come into the power, the kind of embrace change, move forward into a new cycle. And it's interesting that this full moon happens, it's the second last full moon before, well, it's the last full moon actually before the next eclipse season sort of kicks in, because the next full moon in June will be the full moon in Sagittarius, and that will be part of a lunar eclipse. So I think it's preparation for the next eclipse season, and so I think it's a good time to kind of plumb our depths, to get real when it comes to what is holding us back, because sometimes we can blame all sorts of external things, but it turns out that really we are holding ourselves back through sort of kind of lack of self-belief, doubts, fear of success, fear of failure, etc., etc. So I think this is the time to start getting real with ourselves, particularly before the kind of Venus retrograde energy starts to kick in, because with those squares to Neptune there is this potential for kind of self-deception and kind of moving back into sort of a space of not being terribly conscious. So I think it's kind of getting real energy. It's about kind of facing certain truths, emotional truths within ourselves, but then moving past them, so kind of overcoming them, and then also using this wonderful Neptune Mercury energy to really detach from our emotions, from the drama and the intensity of our emotions, because Scorpio is a very intense sign and can sometimes get consumed by their feelings. So it's to kind of take a step back from that, and to let go a little bit, not be too much of a control freak, and to let kind of grace and inspiration flow in our lives, to let in some positive energy, to let the magic in, and to see where things go. The future's uncertain. It's always been uncertain, perhaps more so than ever, but nonetheless that doesn't mean it's going to be bad. And I think we really need to create space in our lives where we are open to the idea of miracles, because certainly when Neptune is concerned and when it's well aspected, there is definitely the potential for miracles there. So I think, with that said, I think just let go with the flow. Remember, this is a water sign, so don't fight whatever comes up. Let it out. That way it won't consume you. And sometimes we have to feel it to heal it, and that can be quite painful and overwhelming, so make space for that over the next couple of weeks, but then move past it, burn through it. This is after all where the sun kind of is just coming out of the burning way, the via combusta. So the sun would just have emerged in the terms of its cycle, because this is 17 degrees of Scorpio, so just on the other side of the via combusta, and so that means that we're coming out of darkness, internal darkness, and I think we need to allow ourselves to do that. So I hope that's been helpful. I'm sending you tons of love, inspiration and magic, and I look forward to seeing you at the next new moon.